Achieving optimal health and self-realization in the modern world involves more than just diets of our food and exercise. It requires a new relationship with light, externally and internally. Welcome to the Light Diet. Chris, this place is awesome. Thanks for having us here today.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. This has been really exciting, building out this new 60,000 square foot facility where we can do all our own research, make all our supplements, do all our testing, and house the whole 95-person tribe.
How did you guys come to this location and being in Colorado? Are you a Colorado native or?
I'm from the birthplace of Jesus, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, steel town, birthplace of me, not Jesus, and moved. I did my grad school in Illinois, and when I was there, I was finishing up grad school and a little postdoc work. I had a patent on some mercury testing, and I was looking for a place to go, and I didn't know where I was going to go. And my spiritual teacher said, "You're going to go to Boulder." And I'm like, how do you know I'm going to go to Boulder? Because they always do stuff like this. They tell you what you're going to do, and you're always like, how do you know that? And so I tried to go anywhere but Boulder, and nothing at all was working. And then finally I'm like, all right, I'll go out to Boulder and check it out. And I went out, and a friend of mine was living out here, and everything just started opening up. I'm like, I guess I'll go to Boulder, but I'm going to go to Boulder, and I'm not going to start my company because he said you're going to go to Boulder and start your company. I'm going to go to Boulder. I'm going to get a job at CU doing environmental chemistry, and I'll take my time starting my chemistry. In fact, there's a job there open. I'm sure I'll get it. And no, not at all. Nothing at all worked except starting my company. So I went to Boulder, and I started my company. And then that was just doing environmental testing, and I wanted to move over to doing clinical testing, but I thought I'd start with what I knew, and so I started doing environmental testing, and that really wasn't going anywhere. And then the blue blockers are on, we're in.
Yes, they are.
And then the economic crash of 08-09 happened. So I started in 2006, and I was building everything up, and then the crash happened, and one guy said to me, the only thing that grew during the Great Depression was healthcare. And I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm just going all the way into healthcare then. And I started offering my testing out in integrative and functional medicine areas. I met Dietrich Klinghardt and Hal Huggins. These were luminaries in original mercury detox work. In fact, Hal Huggins was the original guy talking about mercury amalgams being a problem. And these guys were like, oh, love what you do, love your testing. I had the first product at that point. And so I just dropped all the environmental stuff and jumped totally into clinical stuff, and it just started growing and growing and growing. Now, we were about 3 miles away from here then, and we grew into that space completely. We took some space next door. We grew into that. We outsized all that stuff and made a big jump to go for a new building. This thing was huge. It seemed like gargantuan to us. We had 3 different buildings and 25,000 square foot total. And we're like, God, 60,000 square feet, a 10-year, $10 million lease. Oh my God, let's do it. And that's what we did.
Wow, that's amazing. I like it. The vibe's great.
Yeah.
I could even see one day for my own company having some sort of large, very fitting workspace that we customize to everything.
Yeah.
So I'm super curious about how did you start off into all this? For example, I know you mentioned you're from Bethlehem, Steel Town.
Yeah.
That was potentially related. How did you
loading myself up with metals for 20 years was part of getting to where I got. And so, I was the son of a professor. My dad taught at Lehigh University, and I was very much a reductionist type of guy. And so there's 2 things going on. How did you become who you are, and what were the physical factors? And so my dentist would load me up with the mercury fillings. I had 17 fillings in my mouth, despite only having 1 cavity. Every time there was a little crack, he'd drill it out and put more mercury in there. And then I'm breathing all this stuff in this steel town. All this metal waste is in there. And so I was like loading myself up with this stuff. And one of the other things that happened is I got a TBI when I was in high school, and it was on the left side of my brain, your more rational side. And I was very much a scientist guy, and then I went to school, and the TBI burn was starting to happen. It comes over a couple of years. The bleeding starts screwing things up, and I just wasn't processing as well. And I was having a little bit of a harder time in college. And at the same time, of course, it was college. So, I started taking acid and mushrooms and stuff. And I went from being, a total non-believer in things. I was, very agnostic to like seeing all the interconnection between everything. And so I went through this period where, I wasn't really focusing on school. I was focusing on mind expansion. It was late 80s, and I was already growing indoor organic weed in Pennsylvania, where this is in the Reagan years. You'd be thrown in jail for having a single seed, even, not even bud, just a seed. And back then we had seeds in the weed. And so all this stuff was going on, and at the same time I was also very metal toxic. And then I left school. I became an organic farmer. And I started doing biodynamic farming, even, which is like really out there, sort of soil sorcery stuff. And so I left this science focus, and I went and started looking very holistically at stuff. And so in there, organic farming, it's all about this biological interconnection between the microbes, the plant matter, the decaying plant matter, and the stones. And so I was very much into that. And eventually, when I did my PhD, the discipline I was in was called biogeochemistry. And it's really the interface of all these things coming together that's, you can call it environmental chemistry, but it's got this biological side, chemical side, geological side. And so that's where it all comes together. So I started doing that more in this holistic mind, save the world, feed the world, healthy food, healthy people thing. And I joked that I got out of that the same year that Whole Foods came into business. It was like there wasn't any money. There was not bank in that then. And I went, ironically, I ended up doing a public speaking gig down at Epcot Center, Disney World. I was working at the time for an organic farming research place, and they sent me down there to do this outreach stuff, and that's where I learned public speaking. They trained me in all that stuff. And there I was, out on the stage there in overalls, like showing people worms and compost, and got back from that, and I'm like, oh, and I also met my wife there. And so I got back from that. I'm like, I got to make some money now. And so I'm going back to school. So I went back to grad school first for agricultural pollution chemistry. I was looking at, pollution from agriculture. And then when I went for my PhD, I switched over to looking at metals as toxins, and mercury was that thing. Got my PhD, patented some testing technology there, and then applied and then took that patent and started the company around that. So it was this long kind of circuitous route, and was first doing the testing, and then I'm like, you know what, I got to do the detox too. You point out a problem, you got to come through with what's the solution to the problem, and that's where all the supplements came from.
That's amazing. So you mentioned biogeochemistry, and something that my podcast and my area of interest is on biophysics. So sort of stepping into looking at how particularly light and electromagnetic fields affect our body, and how, for example, the mitochondria are ultimately electromagnetic and they're largely responsible for the functioning of our body. And I'm really curious, have you come across a lot of research there that's interested you, or do you have some, for example, area of interest that you feel relates to biophysics? And
sometimes you're jumping from here we're in, like me, you'll see me jump very quickly from here. We're talking about specifically this chemistry, and we're going to talk about the mitochondria and how the toxins influence them. We take them away, and then we're going to upregulate, synthesis of mitochondria and stuff. And then when I talk about biophysics, I tend to be more like Fritz Albert Pop, talking about photons emitted out of organisms. And so now we're talking more in energy medicine, and even though, I play a PhD chemist on TV, I have this side gig as mystic. And so I'm into all the energy healing techniques. In fact, there's these guys out in Europe that when I met you in London, and that's usually where I hang out with my buddies from Europe that do this photobiophysics. And they have these mirrors that are polarized, mirrors that are made out of highly polished precious metals with polarizer filters on them. And they use them to correct your biophoton field. So all these lights coming out of you, all these photons are coming out of every living being. And in sick organs or with sick people, they lose their coherence and they're usually polarized. And so they'll take these lights and say, we're working on your liver. They'll hold these mirrors, they'll hold them over your liver and they'll start moving out through your light field. And your photons are coming, hitting the mirror, and only the polarized ones are going back. And they use that as a reset to your photobiophysics. And then so they're working with different mirrors and different shapes of mirrors on different organs and stuff. And I was just seeing awesome results from that. And I was always sort of shopping around for what energy medicine modality do I want to use personally when I'm working on people. And that was the one that I settled on.
Who are these guys?
Renzo Kelani. And my friend Shabir Pandor. Shabir also distributes our products in London. He's a holistic dentist there, but he does all this light work as well.
That's amazing. So I figured you know so many people, you know so many things that you would know a lot, and that's what fascinates me, like Fritz Albert Popp and all of their research. So to kind of
and they actually do work with Gerald Pollack too, and they use the mirrors for creating exclusion zone water.
That is very interesting, and I'd love to talk a bit more about that. So to sort of kick off a little bit more here, what's like your ultimate mission and vision that drives you as a person,
Well,
like particularly what has driven you to getting into Quicksilver Scientific, you described a lot of your background, but at this point, based on all of those factors accumulating, what do you see as like your thing that you're sort of striving for and that really honestly lights you up more than anything else?
Yeah, it's always a big question. People are like, well, so why did you start this? It was like, I don't know. It just kind of happened. And, it was an expression of me to do that. And it's still an expression of me to do that. But what is it that I'm trying to express? I'm trying to get the supplement world up to what the dream of the supplement world is. It's like we take these pills and they're supposed to do this and that, but they don't really do all that much, often because you're not absorbing them. So breaking that absorption barrier and getting these nutraceutical compounds into the blood at high levels to really move the needle in people's health, whether they're healing them, they have, chronic toxicities, chronic infections, and you're helping getting them back to health, or just helping to optimize, let's, lengthen our telomeres and activate sirtuins, activate mitochondrial biogenesis. I want products that really, really do that, and I want to get them all out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really relate with that personally because I have, I've been in the world of with my own health journey, struggling, getting into diet, getting into then stricter diets, sort of autoimmune diets where you're really excluding a lot of foods, then supplements, all that stuff. And this was when I was like 14, 15, 16, 17, so on. And then I learned about this guy who you may have heard of, Dr. Jack Kruse, who's a neurosurgeon and focused on light, mitochondria, electromagnetism. He poo-poos supplements a lot. And, I always kind of thought there's got to be more of a middle road, because a lot of the supplements, they don't work. And I took so many supplements. And I joke, but I never felt an effect from a single one, like none. Not like a more energy or this or that. If there was an effect, I didn't notice it. Or it was just like maybe I felt good, but there's plenty of days where I feel great when I didn't take any supplements too. So it's like, so when I heard about this, the liposomal and the absorption, it just made so much sense to me intuitively, and I thought that was really cool. So I appreciate that you're
And do you feel these when you take them?
I'm getting a bit of an interesting brain rush at the moment as we speak. So
yeah, we did kind of light you up before we started.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about, like, as far as your understanding goes, it's super deep in biochemistry from what I've gathered. So there are all these different, biomolecules in the body that, back to the conversation about light and biophysics, that relate to light and For example, Dr. Alexander Wunsch, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Don't know.
He was one of the speakers at the Health Optimization Summit.
Right.
He's a big sort of a student of Fritz Albert Popp and those
Right.
sort of folks. He's the leading researcher in Germany on sunlight and light and how it affects the body. And he told me that basically as beings of light, every single protein, molecule, atom in the entire body, basically everything in the universe absorbs and re-emits light
Right.
in certain spectra, right?
Right.
And he basically said it therefore sort of follows that in our biology there's these biomolecules that when they're energized by the particular wavelengths of light that those structures particularly absorb,
Yeah.
they are more able to, for example, react and make something or
Right.
catalyze the reaction. So there are many examples. I mean, again, you could say every single biomolecule in the body, but there are some really important ones, like, for example, cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria. Right. There's the water, which becomes the fourth phase of water when it's under infrared light. There's the ATPase, and there's data that shows that it spins. There's obviously melanin and all these other things. I'm curious, like, of all these sort of compounds and biomolecules that are known to be really important in our reaction with light, are there any sort of deeper layers of knowledge that you've come across, whether it's with melanin or cytochrome C oxidase, and how, for example, certain protocols you have come up with might be able to significantly improve our body's way to
light
assimilate
processing.
light and so on? Or, like you said, they're using with mirrors, is there a supplement or something that you're doing? In other words, for what I'm interested in, the light diet, you're the guy I would want to ask who would be able to know, what is that 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 supplements that can just supercharge the ability to make melanin and make dopamine in the brain and absorb all the light and all that stuff.
And it's interesting because the mirror guys didn't use supplements at all until they met me. And now ours are the only ones that they use, so because they interacted so well. So probably the most important thing for your work in terms of what we supplement to make that all happen would be building membranes. So phosphatidylcholine, which is part of how we make all the liposomes and the nanoemulsions, is the same thing that your cell membranes are made out of. And a healthy membrane, you've got all the proteins are all embedded in the membrane, and so the ATP synthase and stuff. And a healthy membrane is essential for them. A healthy membrane, it's a big part of the electromagnetic nature of things. It sets up what's called the membrane potential, which is an electrical potential across the membrane, different charge on either side, that drives the reactions in there. And I'm sure that it's driving the ability to use and emit light. So I would say that the membranes are the big biological electromagnetic generators in there. And it's not just the membrane on the outside of the cell. And you think about the great epigenetic guys. What's that one dude's name? It'll come back to me. Bruce Lipton. And his whole thing was that it's the membrane that is the real brains of the cell. And the membrane is where the discussion with the outer environment takes place and signaling what the opportunity is given the resources in the environment to reproduce different genes, all right? And so those you're reading signals outside the cell, communicating them into the cell. So the cell membrane's a huge thing. But then inside, the real generators of everything, like the mitochondria that's generating all the energy, that's a big membrane on the outside and a big folded up membrane on the inside. Endoplasmic reticulum, a huge folded up membrane. And it's all to generate this electrical potential and discharge it into the reactions that are housed inside that membrane. So supplementing with phosphatidylcholine, and now that's in all of our different products, but it's in our pure PC, and we have one coming out called Membrane Men, which is phosphatidylcholine, there's omega-6 fatty acids and plant-based omega-3s in there, along with astaxanthin and tocotrienol. And so that's all to help build membranes. So any way you're getting your PC in is going to help you build membranes. Then you've got the mitochondria, and the mitochondria are driving all of the energy production. And PC is a big food for the mitochondria, but how do you want to really upregulate that? And so I see NAD is probably the most important single supplement. Now, you're not going to take NAD directly. If you're with us, you'll take NAD Gold, which is a liposomal nicotinamide mononucleotide. You can also take nicotinamide riboside. Those all drive NAD, and NAD is shuttling around power. And it's probably shuttling around light because it's taking high energy phosphate bonds and linking things together, and then when you snap those apart, energy goes into the different reactions.
Yeah.
And NAD is known for bringing electrons from the Krebs cycle into the ATP generation into the electron transport chain, but it's also the thing that activates sirtuins. It's the thing that goes into the nucleus and makes sure that the mitochondria and the nucleus are all on the same page about how they make the electron transport chain to make energy. So that PC and the NAD is those are probably the biggest two things. And maybe we'd add on to that some minerals like ketone ocean minerals, and now you can start really moving light around.
Yeah, see that's something that I've thought about too. It's like when again someone like Dr. Cruz or someone else is saying, oh, supplements aren't going to be helpful, I'm thinking, well, there are certain compounds that light's interacting with in our body, and assuming you are getting the light that we need to function as organisms, I do believe that it would be very, very hard, if not impossible, to supplement full spectrum sunlight, because to generate that power of light and those frequencies and every single frequency of the entire visible spectrum plus the UV plus the infrared, no one's been able to do it really so far. Even the best full spectrum bulbs don't even compare to sunlight because they're fluorescent, they have flicker, so it's a mess. So assuming people have that, which I believe is super foundational, if they have those minerals and all the other things that are allowing our system to work properly, I can only figure naturally that they're going to turbocharge.
Everything's going to work better, and the stuff that we're doing a lot of longevity work now, and so a lot of sirtuin activators, things like quercetin and resveratrol, and those are always going to be good things. You got your NAD levels up, you got the sirtuin activators, we have some AMPK activators, sort of fasting mimetics. They just really light things up, and they really, make the body really roll. And then, things that a lot of these also turn up mitochondrial biogenesis, especially if you do them in concert with some fasting, and then you're making more mitochondria per cell. And I think it was just Cruz's thing is just that they didn't used to work all that well. You take a lot of these powders, you can't really tell what's happening, but now bang, it works. That keto product we have, that puts you into ketosis in an hour and a half. You tell me that's not doing something in your body?
Of course.
It's why you call it a fasting mimetic. And so now that we're at this level where we can make these super high grade supplements, we can really move the needle. In fact, we're doing a big study right now. We're doing a 3-month program where the first month's detox focused, the second month is more metabolic focused, and the third month is all NAD mitochondria. And we're doing before and after a huge epigenetic array, looking at people's biological age. Are we shifting the needle there? Telomeres, are we shifting the needle there? NAD levels, sirtuins, AMPK. Klotho is a regenerative molecule. And you're going to see all these things change. And it's all supplement based.
Yeah. So with phosphatidylcholine, are there different sources, different types that the body can be assimilating? And for example, why would it be? What are the types that people would want versus the types to avoid? For example, the first thing that comes to my mind is the difference, and I know this is separate, but between, for example, like rancid omega-3 fatty acids that people could take into their body through a rancid fish oil pill that's been processed and oxidized and isn't in the right position versus a, something like a DHA that's from actually an oyster or a piece of fish. In the same way that you'd want to have the higher quality version of that, what is the difference there with phosphatidylcholine? And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on DHA as well and the importance of that as it relates to cell membranes and biophysics. And
so phospholipids, when we get them, they're isolated from lecithins. So lecithins are byproducts of oil pressing, and lecithin is used as an emulsifier in chocolate and ice cream and breads and all kinds of foods. Now, when you get raw lecithin, it's only about 15% phosphatidylcholine. Now, there's a lot of other junk in there. So if it's soy lecithin, there's a lot of soy-based junk in there, and soy lecithin I don't like. Now, lecithins are cheap source of PC, but with the soy you get all kinds of soy-based estrogens and different anti-nutrients. But you can also get it from sunflower lecithin. So sunflower lecithin's a better, cheaper way to go. But like you said, are the oils in there rancid and stuff? So what we get our stuff is made in Germany, and it's isolated from raw lecithin and purified up until it's over 90% pure phosphatidylcholine. Now here you're talking about going from $5-10 a pound a kilo for raw lecithin up to $200 to $300 per kilo for what we get. But this is the real primo stuff. It's injectable grade, so it's actually used by pharmaceutical companies as well for injectables. But we get that injectable grade and we make all our liposomes out of it. So there's the really, really high end, and you can get capsules of that grade. It's called PPE, polyphosphatidylcholine, and you can get it that way. But the best way for me is to get it from these purified ones through our liposomes or through our pure PC, which is it's like a liposome with nothing in it. Now, food sources, there's a lot in egg yolks. As long as you can get a really clean egg. And me, I can't eat chicken. So fortunately, one of the electricians here grows ducks. And so he always gives me duck eggs. They're still covered in poop on the outside. I mean, totally right off the farm. And so I do a lot of duck yolk for natural source of that. And you do get a fair amount of anchovies, and sardines are a pretty good source of that kind of stuff too.
Would you say there is a significant difference between the superfood grade, highly, isolated version from these lecithins versus that direct food source from your knowledge, for example, from the egg yolks or the anchovies?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. If you're trying to get a lot of phosphatidylcholine, then I'd go to the purified sources that we use. Mm-hmm. If you're more just maintenance, you're getting it from your foods.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. So, as far as mentioning, you were talking about how phosphatidylcholine is really essential for cell membranes. I'd like to move over to DHA a little bit, because something I've learned a lot about is how, DHA omega-3 is generally concentrated in cell membranes, in particular in the myelin sheathing on our nerves as well. And so, it's very efficient based on research I've read at taking, for example, even light energy and being able to convert it into more of an electrical current because of its unique structure. So I'm curious if, first of all, do you guys make a DHA or some kind of product related to that?
We do. This product Membrane Mend is high DHA, plant source DHA from ahi flower. And so that's a blend of the phosphatidylcholine and the DHA from the ahi flower. And that one will be released probably, what did we say, January, February?
Yeah.
January, February, yeah.
Cool.
Probably February then. Q1. And so, we do that. And it's interesting. I saw a lecture from a guy a couple of years ago, and he said if you have enough omega-3 in your cell membranes, you don't burn. I mean, certainly there's a point at which you will sunburn, but the more deficient in that you are in your cell membranes, the less appropriately they process light, the more they turn you into burn instead of absorbing light.
Yeah. Do you feel that there could be a difference from the, I guess the plant source, the ahi flower, versus, again, something from a sardine or a caviar? What would that be?
I like to do both, but if I'm going to put out one product, I wanted to use plant source so you're not alienating the vegans, right? And so that's one source. But for me, I do a lot of caviar, and I do a lot of anchovies and sardines, and so I get it from a broad array of things.
Yeah.
And so that's it. Really, in the end, to have the best health, you're going to integrate your lifestyle factors in your supplementation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, speaking of lifestyle, I did want to ask you, beyond supplements, which I also want to get into a little bit more later on about what your sort of general detox protocols would be, and just a general supplement protocol would be for anyone who's trying to detox or just maintain health. But before we get into that, what are your kind of go-to suggestions about lifestyle? Because obviously you're a guy who's learned a ton, seen a ton, done a ton, worked with a ton of people in different fields. So what would those key things be that you have found to be important for people?
Yeah, I love intermittent fasting. I think that's one of the best things we can do just because it does so many different things. It's helping you detox. It's activating AMPK, which is just cleaning up all the, gets you used to using up all your spare calories. It puts you into autophagy, so you're killing old bad cells, bad mitochondria, rebuilding them. So I like intermittent fasting combined with supplements that help hit those same pathways, like our AMPK charge. It used to be called Keto Before 6. And so there you have a lifestyle supplement interaction. I like omnivory in diet. I think people get all jacked up on diet. And I think there's really good ways to use how much carb or no carb that you have going back and forth between. I like that metabolic flexibility going between keto and non-keto, so carbs, intermittent carb use as well, and a broad spectrum of protein inputs, land sources, sea sources, with just knowledge of, how much toxin exposure you might have. Are you getting grass-fed or not? When you're eating fish, are you eating more smaller fish than big fish, so you're controlling your mercury inputs? So those are easy things where I think flexibility and broad inputs are really important. In the sort of biohacking world, I love red light therapy. I think that works real good. I love saunas and integrating saunas with detox and the supplements for detox. So we have this 2-part detox system called Push Catch Liver Detox. And with these, our delivery system, you have these liposomes and nano emulsions. They absorb and they peak in your blood within 15 to 25 minutes after taking them. And so this makes it really good to stage different things, and a detox is one of them. So you take this liver sauce, all these things that go in and activate movement of toxins out of the cells into the blood, movement of the toxins through the liver, dump them all with the bile into the GI tract. Half hour later, you take this binder blend. It's like charcoals and zeolites. IMD is a proprietary metal binder that we make. So all this stuff goes down to your GI tract, and then you pick it all up with the binder. So you integrate that with the sauna or the red light. You take your liver sauce, you hop in your sauna, you start sweating, you come out and you take your binder. And that gets really, really efficient. So because your toxins are coming out through the skin, they're coming out through the liver, and you're picking them all up there. So you can do that push catch with sauna in the middle. You can do red light therapy in the middle. And, most of the red lights, they're red and infrared, and that's helping you, move toxins as well. Or you can do foot baths. Those are pretty good too. So those are some of the things that I like as, lifestyle factors. And, of course, getting exercise and sunlight in. It's not the best time of the world for sunlight out here in the mountain states, but, it's probably still good for you in San Diego.
Yeah, it's pretty strong. Speaking of, sunlight, circadian rhythms, and artificial light, do you have some perspectives on sort of, the relevance of these from your unique experience, with all these different subjects?
One of the things that really shocked me, now, ideally, when I am on retreat and I'm up in the mountains and I'm with the natural diurnal cycles and I'm out of all the EMF, I bring all my supplements with me and I don't take them and I feel great and I'm walking on the ground and I'm grounded, I'm back to nature boy. It's a lot easier to get by. I got a lot of crutches in this world here because I'm down here in the fray all the time. What was I talking about?
Yeah, just sunlight and how it plays into your routine.
Yeah, the diurnal rhythms. So one of the things that I found with NAD supplementation is that it puts you up during the day and it helps you sleep deeper at night. And so one of the things that always bothered me when I had an Oura ring and I had one of these watches that watches your heart rate variability was that I never got deep sleep at night. I was getting 10, 20 minutes of deep sleep a night, even though I'd sleep a fair amount. And then when I started bringing my NAD levels up, my deep sleep went up to 1 to 2 hours a day. And it turns out that your diurnal rhythm is associated with the clock genes, and the clock genes are regulated by sirtuins, and sirtuins are regulated by NAD, and so bringing up NAD actually gives you more energy during the day and helps you sleep deeper at night. All right, so that was the one thing from my perspective that I found was really important for sleep, and it was something that gives you more energy during the day and down at night. Now, light, you're the light guy, and because you're the blue blocker guy, you know how bad all these devices are for screwing up your ability to make melatonin. Because blue light, as soon as it hits you, destroys all your melatonin. So even if you wake up in the middle of the night to pee and you flip the light on, you just killed all your melatonin. So, having blue blockers at night is a huge part of being able to get that. And I saw you got a blue microphone.
Yeah, right.
It's a big part of being able to get that melatonin. Now, it was nice to see, like on the new iPhone, iOS, the last few versions, they have this night function where it turns to a red backlight, instead of the blue backlight. But, look at these. We swap them out for more broad spectrum stuff, but it's like all these lights and stuff, they do suck.
Yeah, and there's actually not a good enough selection of full spectrum lights commercially, especially. That's something I'd love to do more in the future. I see that as a vision. So it's really interesting. Sunlight, is obviously critical. When it comes to NAD, it's interesting. I've had someone who is more of an expert in circadian rhythms in the biophysical world. He was explaining to me how he thought that for someone who has really bad mitochondria, he was arguing that an NAD drip, for example, and I presume he would apply this logic to even the oral NAD or something like that, liposomal, was basically saying that if someone's mitochondria are really bad, they're not going to be able to necessarily utilize all of that NAD you're putting in. For example, like from my understanding, when our mitochondria aren't working as well, there's generally basically swelling going on in the mitochondria. So instead of them essentially being very tight and compact, there's increases in the distance of the different respiratory proteins. And so there's a basically significantly decreased efficiency of tunneling of electrons. And, that all comes from, for example, like low melatonin means less mitochondrial repair and basically poor biophysics, poor water structuring because of a lack of red and infrared. So I'm curious what you think about like that kind of perspective. Could someone blow themselves up with too much NAD in a sense?
Well, that was
circuit.
When NAD came on the scene and it was all hot, people were doing these big 1 gram drips. Or multi-gram drips, and it was just too freaking much. And there would be all this, and I was puking and pissing on myself, and it was really awesome. That sort of biohacker thing that the more traumatic the experience is, the better it must be. And I just interviewed Matt Cook, who's like a big NAD guy, a couple of weeks ago, and he's totally shifted away from that to doing smaller drips and doing the liposomes in between. And so it's a matter, because, when the mitochondria is all blown out, how much can it incorporate? Now, bringing the NAD levels up is going to increase your ability to take out the bad mitochondria, replace them with new mitochondria, and increase mitochondrial density through these different triggers, gene triggers to activate that are all sirtuin driven. So if your NAD is low, you're never going to be able to rebuild this mitochondria. You're just stuck with these screwed mitochondria. And so I totally believe in using the NAD to help bring that up. And there's a couple of different tools and different other triggers that are going to, like resveratrol and PQQ and the PC, that are going to help there. But you have to start low and bring things up. And at the same time, you're going to, as you start generating more energy in the cell, you're going to start dumping the toxins out. So when you're repairing someone like that, you have to have detox pathways open. You have to have support for that as you titrate up NAD levels and start bringing up mitochondrial health. And just trying to do that all at once with an IV can have all kinds of negative repercussions. The other thing they weren't doing with NAD correctly was balancing it with methylation cycles, about MTHFR genes and methylfolate. That was a big thing a couple of years ago. Everybody was taking methylfolate, methyl B12, because I have an MTHFR problem, and which I'll call it a motherfucker problem because that's what the initials look like, and that would do them well at first, and then they would crash. Well, when you use NAD to turn over sirtuins, you make a byproduct called nicotinamide. And then you have to pee that out or it blocks the sirtuins. And you have to methylate it with SAMe. And so activating and pushing NAD pathways is also a drain on your methylation. So you have to take the methylation factors at the same time. And so we sell them together and we advise to take them in pairs. And we have, a product that has them all together. It's got the nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is the NAD precursor, with the methylation factors and with the resveratrol and quercetin. And resveratrol and quercetin help turn over the sirtuins, but quercetin also helps get rid of senescent cells. So senescent cells are things that when the cells stop being able to grow and they go into this zombie-like state and they release pro-inflammatory cytokines and they kind of recruit other cells into this senescent stage. And so you want to get rid of those, and quercetin's one of the things that gets rid of those. So you have to know when you're bringing something up like the mitochondria, and you want to bring up NAD, you got to know what you got to balance it with and how do you hit those triggers. And so the triggers like the sirtuins are going to help activate building new mitochondria. So it just has to be done skillfully, knowing all the support that needs to be there. And this sort of cowboy way of, hey, just take a couple grams of NAD, that usually goes the wrong direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I'm personally looking as much as I can towards how could someone heal their mitochondria, turn over their bad mitochondria, heal their cells, detox even, with nature, with saunas, with cold plunges, and CT, with sun, with grounding, like you said. But obviously, there's so many people today living in this super modern world, and so not only is that all not possible for everyone, people can try to make hard transitions and extreme jumps, but it's just not going to happen for everyone. I do really believe that there is something tremendous to be said for functional supplements that actually work combined with the nature side of things, because I do think there are a lot of people out there who will take, for example, Quicksilver Scientific product, but maybe even still eat a horrible diet or not go outside and get full spectrum sunlight, so then they're deficient in the probably 800 other metabolites that sunlight's related to that we don't even all know what they all are. So, but I think it's fascinating because it makes sense. Personally, I was actually doing this whole sort of natural mitochondrial protocols that I had learned about from people like Dr. Kruse, Dr. Wunsch, these Light and Fritz Albert Popp, these different researchers. One thing I was doing a lot of too was eating a lot of seafood for the DHA. Yeah. And after a couple of years of doing that, I was like feeling actually almost worse than when I had started my own health journey, and I got my mercury tested and I was like 20 nanograms per Yeah, I think whatever the measure
20 ppb probably, nanograms per mil.
Yeah. And that's pretty high, isn't it?
Yeah, it's high. Yeah,
I was messed up. So I got it down since I wasn't doing any particular chelation or anything other than just, again, a lot of times sweating. Well, not actually, mostly just sweating in the sun, cold thermogenesis, just doing everything I could naturally. And I got it down to 5, and it's still going down. So 5's still pretty high. Yeah,
get it down a little bit lower, but you're never going to get too much lower if you keep eating seafood. Now, I wouldn't say not to, but you can, if you're doing all the right stuff, you'll tolerate 5 no problem. And just make your choices of seafood from smaller fish. Don't be doing swordfish and tuna are the ones that
I haven't eaten them in over a year now, just because when I realized how bad it was.
Exactly. That happened to Tony Robbins. He went from being a vegan to being a paleo guy, and all he ate was swordfish and tuna because he thought, they're from the top of the food chain. I'll get them flown in from Hawaii. They'll be like spiritual fish, and they'll say nice things to me, and they're the highest mercury. And his mercury was 125. Wow. And his wife calls us up and is like, you got to help Tony. Tony, the energy machine, was having memory problems and he was exhausted all the time. And it was like, no, you got to eat the littler fish.
Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, caviar is the best example because you get the biggest bang for your buck on DHA. And a lot of the nutrients, the phosphatidylcholine, I believe, is in there as well.
There's a lot of PC in there. In fact, there's fish source PC, and I was getting krill source PC for a little while. But the fish stuff really is pretty nasty smelling, and I was like, well, if I use the plant based, then then the vegans will be fine with it too. I wasn't trying to replace fish out of people's diet.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when it comes to, I think we've touched a lot on like the lifestyle and different components of that, so I feel really, really good about that. When it comes to the mitochondria, that's something you've been talking about a lot. Like for you, at least as far as I've learned, mitochondria are the sort of key piece of the cell. They're the energy producers. They're the merger of mitochondria and the other. It was an archaeobacteria that merged and did endosymbiosis. Basically, allowed for the energy savings in a sense to scale to organisms trillions of times the size of those single-celled organisms, which was the limit for more than half of all evolutionary history. So all of our function and existence is predicated and dependent on energy coming from mitochondria. So for you, what are the things that you have come to understand are like the key hacks to boost and optimize mitochondria?
Yep.
And at the same time, what are the things from your perspective that are the most inhibitory, in getting into maybe mercury?
Yeah. So toxins are probably the biggest thing as effects on the mitochondria, and the biggest toxins as mitochondrial toxins are usually metals, and mercury, cadmium, and arsenic are the worst ones for the mitochondria, and in your cytoplasm versus the mitochondria, you have some of the enzymes are in a different shape inside the mitochondria. So in the glutathione system, glutathione's your main antioxidant, it's your main detoxifier, it controls your immune system, it controls telomeres and telomerase. And it's got enzymes that work with it, and it has different ones inside the mitochondria than out. Now, inside the mitochondria, there's all this reactive oxygen species because there's respiratory bursts and there's these little explosions of oxygen stress. Yet the mitochondria is more reduced, more antioxidant than the cytoplasm. So the enzymes that use glutathione in there are shaped differently, and they're shaped differently to handle the oxidative stress in there from the oxygen bursts. But the problem with that, the flip side of that, is they're more sensitive to mercury, cadmium, and arsenic to damage them. And once those metals go in and damage those enzymes, it loses that highly reduced nature, and there's all this damage to the mitochondria. So, and that's glutathione peroxidase, thyroredoxin reductase, glutathione reductase. All these enzymes that work together with glutathione get all damaged. Plus, the glutathione's how you get the mercury out. And so you're lowering glutathione levels in the mitochondria all the time when the metal levels are high. So you got to get the toxin load down. The more we look at things like mold toxins, we're finding they're affecting mitochondria as well. So all those things damage mitochondria, so you need to detoxify. And
could I ask about mold? Is that something that the body is thinking of it as something that's threatening, and that's why we're, for example, like a bacteria, and that's why it creates a stress response and all these issues, or the mold toxins themselves?
The toxins themselves.
So what are these primary toxins, the molecules?
Ochratoxins, aflatoxins.
Okay, yeah.
There's a number, there's like 8 main toxin classes that are mycotoxins. And they're just toxic compounds that these things make. And they get into you, and they screw up a number of things. All right, so you got toxins that are damaging the mitochondria, so you need to get rid of those. And then you have how do you maintain mitochondria? How do you prune old mitochondria? How do you make new mitochondria? And that's all within the domain of AMPK and sirtuins and NAD. They're all working in this domain of energy metabolism. And one of the biggest toxins for mitochondria long term is carbohydrates, because all these things, like when you say, oh, I got to juice my mitochondria, I got to get rid of old ones and make new ones, I need more mitochondria, that's all when you're carb starved. So that's one of the good things with keto diets. It's one of the things with low carb diets. And with fasting, is that you hit a trigger called AMPK. And then AMPK in turn interacts with sirtuins and NAD to activate autophagy. And within autophagy, the subset of autophagy is mitophagy, where you go and you take mitochondria that are damaged and you put them in an autolysosome and you break them down into all their little parts, And the flip side of that is mitochondrial biogenesis, where you make new ones. So it's only during this carb starvation that you go into this autophagy and you get rid of old stuff. Now, how do you even know the old stuff, how's a bad mitochondria versus a good mitochondria? It's because the membranes start getting damaged. And when the membranes get damaged, they get little markers put onto them. And they attract these little markers. And so then when you go into autophagy and you start doing mitophagy, the subset of it, you're looking for the mitochondria with all the tags on it that says, I'm old and I have damaged membranes. And then you take it, swallow it, and digest it. Again, the flip side of that is mitochondrial biogenesis, and you have to have NAD activating sirtuins and be AMPK activated, and that means in this carb-restricted state. Now, I don't advocate necessarily being like keto all and carb restricted all the time, and because you tend to just sort of fade away. You need that building up of the mass, and so it's this switch called mTOR, the mammalian target of rapamycin. That's either going forward, where it's stimulated by insulin, which is stimulated by carbs, or stimulated by branched-chain amino acids, and that puts you in anabolic mode, build everything up. Or during the AMPK activation, during the carb restriction or the fasting, or you're using supplements to drive that, then you're mTOR blocked and you go into the catabolic side, which is this autophagy where you're cleaning up all the mess. When you're young, you're growing all the time, but then you get to that, you get over, in your 30s and 40s and 50s, now you got to start cleaning up a lot of that mess, and then you have to spend more time in there. So, I like going back and forth between, more fat burning versus carb burning, and they call that metabolic flexibility. And the thing that they missed during the paleo times was that too much protein does a lot of the same things that the sugar does, because the branched-chain amino acids put you mTOR forward, and all that protein, you do what's called gluconeogenesis, and you turn it into sugar. You turn protein into sugar. So when you have these times when you're carb restricting, you also have to protein restrict and bring that down to a moderate protein level, and that's when you're burning up and cleaning up, and then you can switch back and do a couple days where you're more on these complex, high-quality carbs, and then you're anabolic and building up. And so really getting to know that Taoist rhythm of yin and yang, and a lot of times the biohackers are very guilty of missing balance and rhythm and doing too much of one thing, one direction, and not all of it. A lot of the early guys did that. I remember Mercola was all obsessed with mTOR blocking, and he almost wasted away to nothing. And he was all totally carb restricted and protein restricted, and he was like gray and gaunt. And then he was like, no, now I only do that for 4 days, and for 3 days I do complex carbs, and he looks great now. Yeah. So a lot of it is balance.
So just a side note, I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but what do you think about the idea of natural seasonality, for example, of foods? I would imagine, and based on the evolutionary evidence and people in the wild still, first of all, they're prioritizing, from my understanding, organ meats. We're not going after the steaks. That's generally the least desirable part. That's almost left for vultures and coyotes and so on, but we want the heart, the brain, the lungs, the balls, and all that stuff. So that, is much higher in fat and lower in protein, so it sort of makes sense. It's, of course, still really high in protein, but there's generally higher amounts of fat in certain tissues, for example, brain and so on. So do you think that additionally, even in actually equatorial tropical regions where there could be enough sun year-round, and there is for fruits and vegetables, there's typically a dry season and a wet season. So even if there's not a pure winter, there's still times when there's more harvest of fruits and, plant foods, carbs, complex carbs, and so on. And then there's more periods of fasting and eating animals and maybe seafood or something like that. Right. So do you think that might be a natural mechanism for this process to occur in the body, we're in a state of ketosis? Because in Denver, you wouldn't be getting any, carbs until probably March or April.
Yeah, and so you'd be keto all, you're going to be keto all winter and spring, and then, summer you're going to be carb fed, fall you're going to be really carb fed, and you're going to go anabolic, you're going to build up stuff and store fat, and then in the winter you're going to burn that all up, and you're going to be all keto. And the whole epidemic of diabetes, all the obesity and metabolic disease now is from carb all the time, 3 times a day, all year round. The food pyramid that was put out before you were born, it was in the 80s, was like all about tons of carb and a little tiny bit of fat. And it was so wrong, and it's led to all the health problems that we have now.
Yeah, that's kind of terrifying. So
it is.
As far as the sort of takeaways for people go with your ideal detox protocol for people, I'd love to know, like, if on your podcast with Luke Story, it was over a year ago you guys did it, but you mentioned that in the modern world you don't really need testing or a prerequisite to consider doing a detox, right?
Yeah.
Like, people can just do it because many people are toxic with many things. So is there anything you would suggest as like a one-size-fits-all sort of detox, a couple of your supplements, and then after that, is that something you'd recommend people permanently stay on just to keep detoxing kind of ongoing, or is there a slightly different protocol or totally different protocol you'd say keep people on, maybe like your top, 3 to 5 supplements, because you guys make dozens, right, for all kinds of things?
Yeah, we really do. And so I like people to go through a more formal detox, which is, maybe a couple months of the detox. And after that, the intermittent detox. Maybe you do it on the weekends, or once a quarter you do 2 weeks of it, that kind of thing. And then there's stuff that you stay on all the time. And then within the detoxes, we have a core center of the detox called our push-catch liver detox. And even though it says liver, it's the whole body. But then you can add things around it, like, I want it to be metal specific. So the push-catch liver detox has this stuff called liver sauce and the binder. So detoxification has to be coupled to bile flow, because bile transporters are moving bile salts and toxins out of the liver into the bile tract and then into the GI. So the movement of toxins is coupled to the movement of bile. So you need to have adequate bile flow. So in the liver sauce, there's actually traditional bitters. We have a product called Bitter X, which is in there, but it's got dandelion and solidago and myrrh and gentian. These were things that would be in the old, like the Swedish bitters, which were to drain bile. So there's that. There's some things to upregulate NRF2, which is a trigger. It's a protein that goes into the nucleus and turns up all of the detox and chemoprotection genes all at once. So you start making more glutathione and glutathione reductase and transferase and stuff. Because the way detox works, in the cell, you have to couple the toxin to something like glutathione. There's 3 main molecules you use there. And you need that coupling. And then you need the transporters that move it out of the cell. So here we need the membranes to be healthy and the transport working, and the transport needs ATP and magnesium. And so that all has to work. And that's upregulated at a cellular level by these NRF2 upregulators. So lipoic acid, quercetin, luteolin, silymarin from milk thistle all do this, and they're all in there. There's also...
This is which product again?
This is called liver sauce.
Liver sauce. So
you've got
like
the bitters in there. You've got the NRF2 upregulators in there, like the lipoic acid and the silymarin. And then quercetin and luteolin are both NRF2 upregulators, and they're mast cell stabilizers. So this is controlling allergic reactions that happen in your body when you start moving toxins around. There's also DIM in there, which helps upregulate NRF2 and also helps balance the immune system. So there's all these programs in this one thing called liver sauce, and it gets into you really fast. It mobilizes all these toxins, it couples them into your bile, and then half hour later you take this ultra binder, which has got 5 different binder types and some fibers for the GI. So that is your universalist detox. That just gets everything to move and catches it all.
And now, you said you want to couple that potentially with sauna and heat in like after taking the first part.
I mean, you don't have to, but it's best to. Like, if you can do that, that's what I'll do in the morning. I'll take the liver sauce, hop in my sauna, then I'll take the binder afterward. So that whole combination there works good. Now, if we wanted to say you do your metals test, and you're like, I got mercury and lead. Well, then we're going to add on glutathione, liposomal glutathione for the mercury, and we're going to do a liposomal EDTA for the lead. And then we're going to have you run for a couple of months. Now, you say, oh, I've got chronic viral issues in my past, Epstein-Barr, then we're going to add on the cat's claw. So there's these little modules we can add on. Or like, I've got this serious anxiety, I'm in fight or flight all the time, from these toxins, then we're going to add CBD on. We do that a lot with autism because they're always in that fight or flight. So we're going to run you through that, whatever we couple on there, we're going to run you through that for 1 to 3 months to get everything down. And then you're going to pop that in over time, once a quarter or on the weekends just to keep refreshing. Now, what's your stack for going forward all the time, and how is that supporting things? Now, for everyday supplementation, I like to focus around that nexus of NAD, sirtuins, and AMPK. And so for me, I take the NAD Gold and the Methyl Charge every day. Most stuff I don't take every day. I pulse it, a couple days on, a couple days without, including almost anything that's plant-based and activating a gene set. I don't want to have it all the time. So I don't, even when we're doing that detox for 3 months, you're going to do 5 days on, 2 days off, or 10 days on, 4 days off. And so those things I like to come intermittently. AMPK charge used to be called keto before 6. These are all botanical extracts: berberine, resveratrol, quercetin, dim, silymarin, and cinnamon. I like to do those maybe 4 days a week, or the adaptogens 4 or 5 days a week. So I like some blend of the AMPK activators, the sirtuin activators, and adaptogens, and I'll be doing them not every day, and then the NAD every day. And so I'm cruising along with that. I'm doing detox intermittently to just keep, to keep the weight off, and that's sort of the core of how I run with things.
That's pretty cool. So you would recommend that as like a general thing other people could do?
Yeah.
Awesome. Just a quick pause. How are we doing on time? How much longer do you think you'd want to go?
5-10 minutes.
5-10, perfect. Yeah, I'll throw a couple closure questions. All right, sound editor, cut that out. Or just leave it, actually. So there's a couple things I just kind of want to hit a little bit more on the rapid side here. So melatonin is something that you guys, I understand, have a product of. And again, like Luke mentioned on his podcast with you, he and I kind of come from that same camp where we don't want to take too much exogenously based on some evidence that could affect the negative feedback loop endogenously. I'm curious what you think about that negative feedback loop, and is the evidence sufficient there in your opinion to warrant people avoiding things like massive NAD plus strips or regular large amounts of melatonin, as opposed to doing something like blue blockers or other supplements where you don't want to necessarily overdo it?
I do believe. In some animal studies, I've seen where it blows their natural production, melatonin, exogenous melatonin. Now, I just saw that study, and I'm trying to dig it up and calculate how much they were taking. So melatonin, I believe in very, very small doses of melatonin, less than 1 milligram. A lot of people are taking 5 to 20 milligrams. And then there's these hypertherapeutic doses for cancer and neurodegenerative conditions and autism where there's a couple 100 milligrams per day. But I would never, anything above 1 milligram, I don't want people doing every day. And we do have it. I do view melatonin more as a crutch to get you back onto a groove, get you back into sleeping, because when you're not sleeping, everything's a freaking disaster. Course. But our CBD Synergies SP, it has full spectrum CBD, it's got GABA, it's got it's got a little bit of 5-HTP, it's got some botanicals, passion flower, skullcap, and chamomile, and just 1/4 milligram of melatonin. And I'll use that intermittently. I'm pretty sensitive to melatonin, and I find that combined, all those different things to calm you down, get you into sleep, works pretty well. Like I said before, that it was really the best thing for long-term sleep for me was getting my NAD levels up. We also, interestingly, have a product called LipoCalm, which seems to stimulate you to make melatonin, and it might be some of the botanicals in there. But
LipoCalm, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, GABA with passion flower extract, skullcap extract, and chamomile. And that, we had to dial in the dose of passion flower. People were hallucinating from it. But that seems to make, because, I get the same symptoms from taking melatonin that I get from taking the Lipocom. And so there you're getting endogenous production of it through this supplementation it's stimulating.
Yeah.
But I do share the worry there of too high a melatonin dose interfering with your own production. Other things, NAD, as you get old, your NAD levels are going down, and your lifestyle factors bring them up, but not enough. And, I'm now using it long term. I've been using it for a few years now. I truly believe in the NAD supplementation. Glutathione, high doses do interfere with your own production, but that's in cell cultures where they're doing really high amounts that are kind of hard to do. We're sort of topping up the tank a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't do it all the time either. I do it when I'm doing a detox or if I'm trying to boost my immune system, and I'll do it for a time-limited amount.
Cool. So there's this interesting, of course, data around melatonin being a key repair molecule for basically oxidative stress in the mitochondria and throughout the cell. So I do find it really fascinating that when we get, for example, like morning sunlight exposure and, for example, wear blue blockers or something and have our circadian rhythm dialed in, again, not everyone can do this necessarily. People can, but not everyone, if they do it, is going to get the right benefits. So that's where something like this supplement might come in.
Yeah.
But when we do that, it is repairing the mitochondria. It's helping to quench those free radicals, repair the mitochondrial DNA, so we don't necessarily have to turn them over as frequently. But I like what you said about how, as we age, these things do decline a lot. There's like Dr. Douglas Wallace. Are you familiar with him? He's a leading mitochondrial researcher on, particularly the shift from genetic disease to mitochondrial genetics in disease and heteroplasmy. I'll send you some of his papers, but I think you'd find it fascinating.
Oh, I would.
But it seems that, there is some, in my opinion, a really good combination to be had between, optimizing these natural lifestyle factors to support those systems, the sunlight, the grounding, the cold water, the saunas. Again, throwing in those supplements that are going to allow you to optimally take in all those external factors of lifestyle and, maximally function ongoing. So with that being said, I'm kind of curious to close off if you could throw together just off the top of your head from your products or anything like the optimal sort of light diet supplement protocol specifically for anyone who is concerned, let's say, about taking too much of something directly like melatonin, rather something that throws together the key precursors, for example. It sounds like your NAD supplement isn't actually NAD, it is a precursor the body can use. So I like that a lot because it's like you give the body what it needs and it takes what it can based on the environment, but you don't force it and, for example, take a ton of melatonin to knock yourself out, but then ruin your cycle. So, for example, assuming someone's eating a diet high in caviar, which is what I recommend, high in oysters, high in organ meats, and that kind of thing, also getting sunlight, grounding, cold thermogenesis, sauna. So they're doing everything right. They're almost like the nature boy, like you're up in mountains in your prime. Yeah. What would you say, off the top of your head, are the top things to bring in, for example, the precursors for melatonin, like the tryptophans, for dopamine, the tyrosines, the precursors for vitamin D3, cholesterol, like the couple things that just come to mind to throw together there?
It's
a loaded question. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. What do I use? What do I recommend out of our world? On the neurotransmitter side, CBD is really good at helping regulate the brain chemistry and get you into the right space there. So that's one where you're not interfering with melatonin production. You're still making it yourself. You're going to do all those lifestyle factors. So maybe some CBD just to create that calm space. If you need a little bit more, GABA is one that's a little harder to dysregulate. And so those help on the calm side. I do now. Maybe for yourself, you don't need the NAD as much, but as you get, over 40, that's going to be a big thing. It's just there's only so much you can do to keep that up. And so the NAD Gold and the methyl charge and adaptogens for sure. Now, there's a product we have called the One and the AMPK charge. Those two I like to go use in alternatingly. One is a little bit more towards building mitochondria, and the other one's a little more towards autophagy and clearing out the old stuff. That's AMPK charge is what puts you into ketosis.
Yeah, so
right
I want
away.
to start. I'm just going to write all these down so that we can make them show notes for the listeners.
Yeah.
So the first one, you're saying you guys do have a CBD, like
We have a CBD, yeah. We have
So
a
we start
full
with the
spectrum, yeah. The full spectrum CBD. That's a really good one. We also there's one called CBD Synergies PN that has curcumin, boswellia, and one or two other things with the full spectrum CBD, and that's a really good inflammation control and calming all at once. So that to settle things down. Then in the adaptogen sirtuin AMPK world, you have AMPK charge. That's more to put you into ketosis and clear away extra stuff. You're trying to lose weight, any kind of deposits, fatty liver, that's the one to go to. The one is more mitochondrial biogenesis. It's got adaptogens PC and PQQ and resveratrol in it, and so that's making more mitochondria. And then any of our adaptogen line, that's Nanomojo, Ultra Energy, or Thrivogen. So those are in that energy and adaptogenic category, sirtuin activation. They're doing all those things. And then for NAD building, you're either going to have NAD gold and methyl charge, and you want those generally in a 2-to-1 ratio.
Okay, and you would take both together, NAD gold
Yeah.
and methyl charge.
Yep,
like
take
you
them at
said
the same
yourself.
time. Or you're going to take NAD platinum, which has both the NAD gold and the methyl charge, and it has some sirtuin activator in it, the resveratrol and quercetin.
That's amazing.
So that's sort of your palette of keeping the energy up and keeping it rolling. And when that membrane mend comes along, that's gonna be a beautiful one to keep all the membranes humming, because that is the source of your biological powers is healthy membranes.
That's amazing. Well, I think we've gone super deep into a lot.
All
I think
right.
the listeners, especially those who like the biochemistry, the supplements, are going to nerd out on this one.
Good.
And putting it together with the light diet perspective, I always appreciate. That's the goal. So
Right on.
ask different questions. Anyway, thanks for having us here today.
All right. Thanks so
Looking forward
much.
to next time.
All right. It's a good time.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Cool.